And so with Sussmann, I think it falls into that category as well of how could this have gone? How could he have ever believed this? He should have been lying to the FBI in his own mind from day one, but there's no penalty for stupidity, and the deep state's got a whole lot of stupid. We just got some breaking news that is discouraging, but not surprising. Not surprising at all, and it's in fact really worth us discussing here for a second. That the lawyer for the Hillary Clinton campaign, Michael Sussmann, who was, pretty clearly lied to the FBI to get the Russia collusion thing going. The verdict just came down, and he was found not guilty. So it turns out, I just want to say to everybody, this should not surprise you. This is why I don't believe Hunter Biden is going to be criminally charged, although there are some rumblings about that maybe happening. So Clay and I can continue to have that discussion here. Clay, look, there's the deep state in the judiciary. This guy clearly misrepresented in a critical way his intentions and the basis for the Russia collusion lie. But this just came down, folks. As we came on air, the verdict came down not guilty. Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer Michael Sussmann, who got the FBI and the media all fired up on the Russia collusion lie. Clay, how does this happen?
I think it's going to be, first of all, the jury made this decision, right? So in general, the beyond a reasonable doubt standard is a difficult one to reach. And my proposition is that juries tend to get things right. I think this was a complicated case. And let me explain why I think it was complicated. My understanding is there was a text message that basically let it be known that Michael Sussmann was lying to the FBI. But then the notes that existed from the actual meeting that he had with the FBI was more complicated. And again, the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt for a criminal prosecution is a high one. Here's what I would say is significant regardless. There were a lot of facts that came out of this case under oath that are very, very significant, leaving aside Michael Sussmann's role here. First of all, Robbie Mook, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, directly testified under oath that Hillary okayed this leak of information to the FBI, meaning her fingerprints are all over Russia collusion under oath and testimony in this case. What will be interesting to see is how this is played. Because remember, the New York Timeses of the world were basically pretending this case wasn't going on. They weren't covering it on a day-to-day basis. They were not maniacally focused on it. Compare it, say, to the way that they covered January 6th. Every little nuance of January 6th is front page news. Very little of the Sussmann trial was treated as front page news. What I will be curious about from a narrative perspective is whether this has trumpeted as evidence that Hillary Clinton and her campaign did nothing wrong, right? Because there is a difference between what they did, which was clearly pollute and create the Russia collusion narrative, and a criminal finding of wrongdoing. I wanted Sussmann to be found guilty because it would then be impossible for the Hillary Clinton campaign to argue that they did anything of a criminal nature or even wrong nature. What's going to immediately happen, I think, Buck, is this is going to be taken as vindication from many that Hillary's campaign did nothing wrong, and anybody who argued otherwise, that Trump, when he said that they were spying and all these things, I think the not guilty verdict will receive far more attention than any of the facts that came out during the case.
It will be amusing, Clay, to watch as all of a sudden the media, oh, look, CNN, breaking news, right? All of a sudden, and for a lot of their audiences, for the CNN audience, for the MSNBC audience, I think they're going to be like, wait, there was a Sussmann trial? Hillary Clinton's lawyer was facing federal criminal charges for lying.
To the FBI.
They don't even, New York Times readers are going to be fascinated to read about this for the first time tomorrow. That's one piece of this. But going back to the beginning of the Russia collusion the giant lie. I mean, honestly, the whole thing was such an obvious fabrication to anybody who was being intellectually honest about this from the start. Clay, I mean, I worked in a federal bureaucracy at the CIA and then spent some time with the intelligence division of the NYPD. And one thing I can tell you is that so much of government power within the bureaucracy, within the federal agencies, is based upon good faith. That the people that are doing the investigating, the people that are doing the subpoenaing, the people that are pulling your bank records, pulling your phone records, they're doing so in good faith. And part of good faith is what you believe to be credible, right? So if somebody comes in, let's say, and they're, if they say, I want to be an FBI informant, and I'm going to tell you where the number 2 in Al-Qaeda is, and he's totally not credible, and you say, you know what, fine, we're going to give you that justice for rewards, we're going to give you the $10 million or whatever the bounty is, that person will be fired because that person's being an idiot, right? You need to do verification. There has to be good faith in that process. And with the Hillary Clinton Russia collusion campaign situation, my concern from the very beginning is that whether it's Comey or Sussmann, Sussmann was a lawyer in private, but you know what I mean, whether it was Comey or Lisa Page or Peter Strzok or any of these individuals, they could always fall back on, not our fault, we are so stupid that we actually believe this. We really thought this maybe happened, even though no person could credibly think. And so with Sussmann, I think it falls into that category as well of, how could this have gone? How could he have ever believed this? He should have been lying to the FBI in his own mind from day one, but there's no penalty for stupidity, and the deep state's got a whole lot of stupid.
Yeah, and look, to me, this evidence also is, we talked about this, I think, last week with Andrew McCarthy, if I'm not mistaken,
yes.
Buck, and he was skeptical that we were going to get a conviction, and we dove into the details.
He kind of called
based on the jury pool. Right? I mean, you're talking about a jury pool that overwhelmingly believes that Donald Trump is Satan and that Hillary Clinton was robbed of the 2016 election. That's what the jury pool in Washington, D.C. is going to believe. And so their pre-existing biases, I think, factored in here, making it a more difficult forum than, say, having this case in Wyoming or West Virginia or someplace with a really high predisposition to believe what I think is the truth, which is that Hillary's campaign helped to spread Russia collusion. The other thing, Buck, from pure evidentiary perspective, I think this is complicated for a lot of jurors to understand. And I obviously, we didn't watch this on a day-to-day basis because we're live on the air. But what you have to do is drill this down to make it understandable. And to me, as a lawyer, when Michael Sussmann is billing Hillary Clinton for his meeting with the FBI, which his billing records reflect that he did, it's really hard for him to argue that he's not meeting with the FBI as a representative of Hillary Clinton's campaign when he sent the text message saying that that essentially he needed to meet with them. The evidence to me is clear that he lied to the FBI. And by the way, this is what almost everybody, now to his credit, he refused to plea. He went on trial and he beat the trial. I'm sure he has incredible lawyers. He had a good forum. But this is what almost everybody in the Trump ambassador, the Trump scope, the Trump penumbra got in trouble for. Not actually Russia collusion, but lying to the FBI when they were suddenly, hauled in and harangued by FBI officials about all this different issue, and they're just, panicked, right? So this is intriguing in some ways. Just FYI from a walking through the legality perspective.
First of all, I think you're upping the ante a little bit here with amateur and penumbra, just like tossing that in there. Clay was dusting off some of the legal books this weekend. He's ready to rock.
What's crazy is, the penumbra is basically where the right to abortion came from in Roe v. Wade, right? Like that you have, and it's always been crazy. That's the phrase, phraseology is that there are certain rights that are then encapsulated within the penumbra of other rights, which is that right to privacy and everything else.
It was intellectual nonsense, but yes.
But that's the expansiveness. Yeah. But this, in the same way, there are so many people that got in trouble for Russia collusion, not for actual Russia collusion at all, but for the FBI questioning them about Russia collusion.
This is why,
and this all started with Sussmann and Hillary Clinton's campaign being involved in helping to create this great big lie.
Yeah, this is why from the very beginning, some of us were saying, I mean, I can speak for myself on this issue because now, Clay, we're going back, 6 years now, saying anyone who thinks, oh, just wait, there's going to be justice. How? How is there going to be justice when the process was the punishment? This was used. The special counsel, the Mueller probe, investigation, whatever you want to call it, that was used as the primary political weapon against the Trump administration to slow down that White House, to put the fear of God into, or the fear of Mueller, I suppose, into all the people in that White House working for it, made it harder for them to get legal representation, made it harder for them to get people to come work for Trump for all 4 years. You had friends in that White House. I knew people well in that White House. So they were successful in the dirty trick. And now what you find out is that the ultimate fail-safe that the deep state has is, FBI guys, for example, like Peter Strzok, I'm so stupid I actually believe that Donald Trump did this and that we just couldn't prove it. That was their fail-safe. And then for anybody on the private practice side of this, a lawyer like Sussmann or in the private sector, it is, oh, I can just count on a D.C. jury to bail me out because the actual chance that you have Democrats who believe Russia collusion on a D.C. jury is over 95% based on the population. Those are the actual numbers based on the political affiliation of people in D.C. So how are you going to get justice in this case? And people that are saying, oh, just wait for it. We waited for it, and now we're seeing it.
Well, again, I would say the under oath testimony is at least helpful. It wasn't covered very much, but now all of a sudden the not guilty verdict is going to be covered as a clarion call. And it also makes it more difficult. We'll talk about the impact. Again, this news just breaking as we're coming on here. It also impacts potentially, look, you got a term limit issue, and you've also, not term limit, but a statute of limitations issue in terms of when you're able to charge people for criminal violations, given the fact, as you mentioned, Buck, it's been 5 years since a lot of this stuff happened back in the 2016 presidential campaign. And also, when you lose a case, it makes it more difficult for you to feel like you should charge someone else, not to mention Sussmann himself could have ended up under fire potentially if he had lost this case, and maybe he rolls over on somebody else in the grand scheme of things associated with that.